So there was a regulation that has been implemented. I think it was a year and a half ago that, in my opinion, is not maybe not ruining real estate, but like definitely not helping, definitely making things worse. And I think if we extrapolate the negative effects of this regulation over the course of the next decade, it's probably going to do a lot of damage. And before I get into this, I want to openly say that I'm going to be basically criticizing a regulation that the NDP brought in. But you can bet if the Conservatives got in, they would have done a bunch of stupid stuff as well. And I'd be criticizing that stupid stuff. So although I'm right-leaning, if I see a dumb idea, I'm going to say, or if I think an idea is dumb, I'm just going to say it's a dumb idea, right? So the first thing that I want to say is that, in my opinion, this is another example of treating the symptom and not the illness itself, okay? And the rule that I'm talking about is the flipping tax. So they brought this tax in to basically stop speculation. And I want to first talk about the fact that a lot of people don't realize that a speculator and a flipper are two very different types of investors. A flipper is running a business and employing people. And in my opinion, they're doing nothing wrong. They're doing nothing that negatively affects the real estate market whatsoever. A speculator is just buying a property and then hopefully selling it within a year when the price goes up. A flipper is actually doing renovations. They're improving the property and then they're selling it 3 to 4 months later. So it ends up being like a net zero. They're not buying property and holding on to it. They're buying it, they're fixing it, they're making it look nice, and then they're selling it again. Two very different types of people here. And when they implemented this rule, they essentially made them one. They said flippers and speculators, but then they just called everybody speculators and then called it the flipping tax, right? And there's a lot of problems with this rule and a lot of negative things that come from it. And, you know, the problem with it is that a lot of people can still get around the flipping tax. It's just only a certain group of people that can get around the flipping tax. I'm not going to openly say who it is because I don't want to ruin it for them, but it just creates a very anti-competitive market for those people. Now those people can go and flip homes and nobody else can't because they have a certain situation and a way around paying that tax. But the first thing it does is I've seen this happen now probably 50 times in the last year and a bit where like somebody's parents die and then the children inherit the property, inherit the property, and the property will be in a state of disrepair because whoever owned it was quite old, maybe they were ill, and they couldn't keep up with the maintenance, and they just kind of let things get out of hand. So now they have a property that they need to sell where basically the only buyer pool for this would be a flipper, would be somebody who's going to buy it for cheap, do the work to renovate it, and then list it back on the market and sell it. Well, now that buyer doesn't exist because we have a 20% flipping tax. So you pay your PTT, you pay your flipping tax, you pay your capital gains. There's nothing left for all this headache that you're going to do as a flipper, essentially making that whole business unviable. And there's a lot of ramifications to this. Number one being that people that have these kinds of properties are going to struggle to sell them or have to sell them for extremely less than what they're worth. The second thing that it does is flipping is an overall very positive thing for the market. Like if I live on a street and there's a completely dilapidated pile of crap across the road, I'm going to hope that somebody buys it, renovates it, does the landscaping, and makes it look nice because it's devaluing the value of my neighborhood by being an eyesore on my block. I want somebody to buy it and renovate it and list it and sell it to somebody else. The second thing is that a lot of buyers can't afford to do the renovations because you can't roll the cost of renovations into your mortgage. You have to buy it. Let's just say it's $1 million property, and after you do the renovations, it's worth 1.1, right? You can't get a mortgage on 1.1. You have to get a mortgage on $1 million. So now all your money goes to the down payment, and then you have to renovate on a line of credit or some type of credit product, which some people would say is very risky and they don't want to do it. And they don't want the headache of doing that. Whereas if a flipper has come and renovated that property, now you can buy it and you can mortgage the whole amount. You don't have to put up cash or credit from a different credit product after you close to do the renovations. You can roll those renovations into a 30-year amortized loan. Therefore, it is a much easier product for the overall large buyer pool to purchase. And you extrapolate the effects of this tax over the course of 10 years. A big problem we have in this market is we have had supply issues for a long time. Now we don't. But I would argue that we kind of still do, because 90% of the product on the market is garbage. It needs extensive renovations. It's bad floor plans. It's super old product that doesn't make sense for families today. And these flippers before would come in and renovate these homes and make them better and more livable for another buyer, so that buyer could buy and mortgage the entire amount of that home. Well, imagine the effects of no flippers over a decade. What is our supply? What is our home stock going to look like 10 years from now with no flippers fixing up all of these homes and making them better for other people to live in? I would say it's probably going to be pretty abysmal. And this is exactly why in, say, Abbotsford, for example, all the starter homes in that starter home market that have renovations that are move-in ready, the price of those really hasn't come down very much. They're still like $1,050,000 to 1.1. But all of the starter homes that need a bunch of work have come down like $150,000 because nobody can afford to do the work. Nobody has the credit available after they close, or the know-how, or the want to even do that. Whereas if we still had flippers in the market, this would be a really good market for flipping. You'd be able to buy stuff way below the market value, do your renovations, and sell it in 3 months and fix up that housing stock. And then another problem that comes from it is jobs, right? Like how many contractors, how many realtors, how many mortgage brokers, the banks, all the people that work at the banks, how many layoffs are directly tied to this? How many people's incomes and profits have dropped because home flippers aren't in the market? There were general contractors who their entire business was just servicing home flippers. There were realtors whose entire business was just servicing home flippers, right? And then all of the companies that supply the materials for those flips, the flooring, the cabinets, the paint, the bathroom fixtures, the appliances, and all of the people that those companies employ, right? There was a lot of job creation that came from flipping that's gone. And in my opinion, this is going to be another one of those regulations that hurts us in the future quite a bit. And I don't think we're going to see the effects of it for many years to come. But I think in 10 years, you're going to have a bunch of dilapidated properties with very few move-in ready properties because nobody's flipped. You know, there's probably thousands of properties every year that would have been flipped that aren't getting flipped. Maybe not thousands, but a lot of properties that would be getting flipped every single year. And you extrapolate that 10 years out, maybe there's 10,000 less livable homes than we otherwise would have, or maybe even more than that. Who knows? I said the same thing about the Airbnb ban, and I still hold the same opinion about the Airbnb ban, that it was going to end up being very negative for us. And lo and behold, now I see this article. Where is it? I'll try to find it. City encourages Vancouverites to consider renting out their homes during the World Cup. It's no secret Vancouver has a severe shortage of hotel room space, so the city is encouraging Vancouverites to look into listing their primary residences on short-term rental sites like Airbnb during the nearly month-long event. With downtown hotel rooms during the World Cup asking $2,000 a night, Vancouverites who choose to rent out a room, a basement suite, or their entire home have potential to cash in. Here's a really good idea. We had that. It's called Airbnb. And there are a bunch of people doing that, and we wouldn't have this problem right now had we just allowed Airbnb to continue. And here is what I thought would happen if they didn't ban Airbnb. That market was already getting saturated. It was already saturated before they banned it. There was already people not making enough money on their Airbnb. A bunch of people, what would have happened is either people that own Airbnbs would have to make their Airbnbs way more competitive. Like they would have had to do something niche. Like they would have had to renovate their condo to look like a sick man cave or something like that. Or they would have had to provide like a niche experience to get the occupancy rates to continue operating in Airbnb because that market was so saturated. And if you weren't willing to run a proper business and build like a niche, cool experience for the consumer, you would have had to put your Airbnb back in the long-term rental stock. The market would have sorted this problem out. The Airbnbs would have served the exact amount of demand that there was, right? If there was demand for that, you can't just take away all of the supply for something which demand exists. Otherwise, you run into problems just like Kelowna is now running into tourism problems because of the Airbnb ban. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't have been regulated more to a certain degree. Like maybe they should have done some other things to regulate it some more. But I think that problem would have sorted itself out on its own. Just like how I think the flipping problem, the speculation problem, has already sorted. There's nobody speculating on real estate now. Nobody's buying a home and just holding it for a year to hopefully sell it for more. That problem doesn't exist. It only existed when we printed 40% of the overall money supply in like 3 years and dropped interest rates to 1%. So nobody wanted to put their money in a GIC or save their money. That capital had to go into something else that was making money. And in Canada, you have the TSX or US equities, or you have real estate, right? And for the most part, if it's Canada, it's just real estate. So everybody put their money in real estate, and all these people were speculating, buying homes, knowing that the price would probably be higher a year later because interest rates are at 1% and they just printed a bunch of money. So instead, if you don't want speculation, you should just not create the environment that is ripe for speculation. Because in my opinion, flipping is actually a very good thing for the market. It provides jobs. It fixes up the housing stock that we have, and it allows there to be a buyer for a lot of properties that there otherwise wouldn't be if flippers don't exist. So that's my thoughts on this. Maybe you agree, maybe you don't. But if you enjoyed the video, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. If you want to chat with me about buying or selling in the Fraser Valley, there's a link down in the description. I am that Agent Kelly. I'm making moves to move you. Peace.